It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Craig, shut up. Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So it's...
Welcome to another Reality Check with Craig Price. Got a great show for you this week. Returning guest Judy Blake joins me to talk about her book, Judy's World. And Judy is a single mother of 2 boys with autism. And being a non-parent, I don't ever have any contact with kids in general. I really don't often have to deal with kids. And I certainly haven't had any dealings with kids with autism that I'm aware of. I've met shy kids, but, in my mind, I didn't see anything wrong with them besides they're shy. Kids don't like meeting new people sometimes, and so they're very shy. So for me, I've never really had to deal with parenting issues plus the fact that you have a special needs child. For me, that is mind-boggling because I have a hard enough time figuring out how to talk to strange kids I've never met, which sounds inappropriate, which is not true. I was just meeting kids. Usually they have parents around. Always have parents around. Man, this is not how I wanted to start this. This is just sounding awkward, and that's how I am with kids. For me, I would rather they be seen from a distance or not at all. Definitely not heard at all, not a peep. So my point of reference with Judy is nil. I don't have a point of reference when it comes to children and autism. So for me, I came at this at a completely blank slate. I had a lot of questions. You hear stories, you watch movies. That's all I know about anything about autism. I think the most I know about Asperger's and autism is watching Boston Legal when Hands. They had a gentleman who had Asperger's, real endearing gentleman, real smart, intelligent, but he always had these awkward social tics that he did that were amusing on the show that they used to show that, people with Asperger's syndrome, people with autism can function in society. And I thought that he was just a great character to have. But that's the only point of reference I have, that and Rain Man. And I think Rain Man is like the number one thing people think about when they think about autistic people is counting toothpicks on the floor. They know really good at math. They've got the special ability that's superpowers almost, and everything else they're not very good at. So I wanted to dispel some myths. I wanted to find out what the reality of living with a child with autism. And she doesn't have just one. She's got 2. And she's also a single mother. So I can't imagine the stress. I can't imagine her schedule. I can't imagine the organization is required just to get through one single day. And when I see and meet people like Judy, I'm just amazed because I know my organizational skills. I can't even start my day on time on a regular time on any given day. So to her to have all these organizational skills plus to deal with the children and to work and do all these things, it's just amazing. And her new book pretty much shows what her life is like. And so let me give you, without any further ado, Judy Blake.
I would love to get into the business sector. I'm sort of working on that because especially some of these engineering firms, accounting firms, some of the banking world, there are lots of people on the spectrum in those environments because people who are autistic tend to go into certain fields.
And when you say spectrum, what kind of... Because that's what I've noticed is that with autism, for me, autism has been... it's grown as a label. They pretty much, if there's any child out there at any moment who just isn't either behaving properly or is quiet or just the opposite is running around screaming and yelling, they kind of throw a huge wide autistic blanket on everything. But that's what I've noticed is that it's like, no, that kid's just acting up. Now he may be autistic, but you can't label every kid who's acting up autistic, and
nor can you label every child who's hyper ADD. And I think that autism is a social communication disorder. On the spectrum, meaning does the child or adult fall mild, moderate, or severe on that spectrum? Only with the proper diagnostic testing and the proper diagnosis, can someone really determine that? I'm pretty good at gauging if somebody's on the spectrum because I can spot people in elevators because I'm so used to it. People tend to put labels on things because they can't see it. I think that there's a huge difference between a kid who's just running around and acting wild.
Undisciplined.
Yes. And someone who is truly ADD. My oldest son is ADD. He's not hyper at all. He's just so severely ADD that he cannot function without his medication. He has tried, and believe me, he would love to not be on it. He just couldn't do it. Because people who have ADD, it's not so much that they pay attention to one thing. They pay attention to everything. So they can't focus. But autism is one of the most misunderstood disabilities I think that we have because our society tends to judge on something that we can't see.
Well, and that's why I'm glad you're here. And for those of you who've listened to the podcast before, this voice may be familiar to you.
Thank you.
She's been on before. This time it's a much more personal situation. Judy Blake is with us. She's here to discuss her new book, Judy's World, The World of Autism Through the Eyes of a Mother. And what was the reasoning behind, what would you decide, I'm going to write this book? I mean, because there's plenty of books about autism, and they can be from the clinical to the stories.
That's right. Because mine is special.
And please, tell us how special it is.
It is very special. It's the most special book you'll ever read. I have been giving speeches for about 10 years. I was approached by someone in the community who said there is a citywide day of learning and you need to speak. You would be great at it. I'm like, me? You're kidding. And I spoke, and it was so well received. So I began my journey of giving speeches. And everyone kept saying, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. I'm like, yeah. Like what you just said, there's so many books out there. What's going to make mine different?
Plus, you need the time.
I need the time, the
understand.
resources. Exactly. It's not like you just wake up one day and say, I'm going to write a book today.
And it's not like you have lots of free time. You are a single mother raising not one, but two special needs children.
Exactly. And I have another business.
And you've got a boyfriend, and you've got social events, and you've got all kinds of stuff going on. So to say, oh, just write a book, they make it sound like you can just,
like it's like going to the grocery store.
I'm going to write a list, of things I need.
Right. And so I finally decided last year, now is the time. Don't ask me what made it the time. Probably something, though, had to do with my oldest was graduating high school, and my youngest was graduating middle school. So it was sort of that line in the sand of, okay, these are two major milestones that my kids have achieved. And that was sort of probably the beginning thought of my process of, okay, maybe now is the time to write the book.
And I'm at a loss. You're on a total disadvantage because I don't have any kids at all.
Okay.
Don't plan on having any kids at all.
Okay.
Kind of don't really like kids. They're kind of like little snotty brats to me sometimes.
Okay.
I mean, I can deal with some kids, but most kids,
you probably like them when they're adults.
Well, of course, sure. And I also like them when they're not in the room.
Right.
Pictures of kids. Oh, that's a nice, cute kid. But
doesn't do anything for you, and that's okay. And it's a good thing you know that.
Oh yeah, and it's not like I treat them badly when they're in the room. But I don't know anything about kids, and the only thing I know about autism is through the media. Right. I mean, you brought up when we were talking off mic, you were talking about, because the only instance that we know of is Rain Man. So it's not like you're taking your kids to Vegas to try to win millions of dollars.
Exactly.
Can he throw down 2,500 toothpicks? Can he count them?
No. But my oldest son is uncanny with math. And ever since he was a young child, he could multiply numbers in his head. And the teacher used to say, show your work. Well, the answer's right, isn't it? Yeah. But show your work. He couldn't tell you how he got to the answer. He just knew the answer. And it was really extraordinary that he could do that at a very young age.
Yeah, I guess some autistic kids have a certain talent or ability.
They do.
And I don't. Then that's another blanket judgment. They automatically assume that they're awesome at one thing.
Yeah.
And they may be really good at a couple things. They may be slightly above average. They may be horrible at a lot of stuff. But it's
exactly.
So you have your first son, who is he has the ADD?
He is autistic. Okay. He has ADD, some anxiety, some obsessive compulsive disorder, because a lot of kids on the autistic spectrum, it isn't just autism. They a lot of times have other issues as well that they have to cope with. That's not to say that is all autistic children. There are no absolutes with autism. The only absolute is no two people with autism are alike. They're going to have similar qualities. They may have similar issues, similar quirks, but they're going to be different in their own way.
And your oldest,
he's now 20.
And what's his name?
Jason.
Jason, because I want to make sure I don't want to call him
Sure.
boy number one, like,
That's okay.
like Dr. Seuss, boy
Yeah.
one.
Oh yeah, thing one, thing two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jason, how did it manifest? How did you realize? Wait a minute, there's something. We need to. This is more than just him not catching on to things, or
That's
there's
right.
an issue. What was the first manifestation that you really went, wait a second, something may not be right?
That's a great question because I talk about it in the book. And, I always believed that, your kids were born with 10 fingers and 10 toes. You're doing all right. I also believe they walk, talk, and they're potty trained by kindergarten. Okay, you're good to go. Because everybody matures differently and they mature at their own rate. And I found that he was missing all of the milestones. When you roll over, when you sit up, when you utter your first words, when you walk around furniture, when you walk. And at the time, the pediatrician said, he's a boy and there's a range. Well, at the time, I was living in Detroit, Michigan. Went to a very good pediatrician, and I did what every other mother does, took them for the shots and did the play groups. I had all the latest gizmos and gadgets and toys to further my child's learning and to, open up his world. And while I noticed he was different than the other kids in the play group that we had, I thought, well, okay, we'll see. Well, by 18 months, it was becoming even more pronounced. But no one could tell me what it was. Mind you, this was 18 and a half years ago.
Well, that's when we were talking about the blanket. I've noticed that the expansion.
It's huge. And I think that it always existed. I think that we're smarter now. And somebody, I cannot remember who told me this before, but it is one of the best statements I've ever heard. It's not that medicine has changed. Technology has changed. And I think that's very true. We know so much more now because of technology.
Yeah, we can actually identify
We can
situations.
do more studies. We can see more things. It's really amazing. And then we moved to Illinois, and I had him tested, and I was told he has a 6-month fine motor delay. So I'm like, okay, big deal. So he doesn't write well. So he can't manipulate a crayon very well. Big deal.
And 6-month delay doesn't seem like a big deal.
No, and especially, again, he's a boy. And he did have some, speech delays, so I had him in speech therapy. Nobody ever used the autism word. And then I noticed he was getting more rigid. He was getting more anxious. If his routine was upset, he became unglued. And I noticed he liked the oddest things. I've always enjoyed cable TV, and I like the political shows. Years ago, there was a show called Equal Time, and it was with Mary Madeline, and I forget who the other person was. He used to love to listen to the opening music of the show. What 3-year-old kid likes that? That's the most bizarre thing.
Maybe he was a libertarian.
Maybe he was like, there you go. He could have been. He could have been.
He's
That's
just getting
right.
his political juices flowing.
That's exactly. He just was an early politician. That's
Yeah.
right. And and little things like that, or like, if the show changed, if the network changed the time of the show. All kids.
Well, that's a Rain Man situation
It
where the
is.
Wapner's on at 4:30.
Exactly. And all kids kind of like their routine. And I was a huge parent who believed in routine and structure. This was extreme. And what I tell people in my speeches and in the book, there's a difference between a child getting uptight when something changes, but when it's constant and extreme, to me, those are red flags.
And when you say extreme, what exactly was he? What kind of extreme?
He would just have a meltdown over the most minor thing.
Just screaming and yelling.
And crying hysterically, or perseverating over it, just obsessing and dwelling on it for the longest time. He couldn't get past it. And it was really unusual that at 2 or 3 years old, he was acting like this over something that was really quite minor. And I noticed he was at a preschool program in our area. We had now moved to Northern Illinois. And all of a sudden, like the other kids would be talking about something, and he would just start talking about random things. that had nothing to do with anything. And granted, one could say, well, he's a creative child.
Yeah,
he's speaking his mind.
Because I randomly say things that people don't like.
And we all have our quirks. It's, again, how much does it manifest itself? And all of a sudden, I'll never forget this. He was walking along. She said they were walking from like the classroom to the playground. And she was walking next to Jason. And Jason was babbling, again, to no one but himself, and saying, Big Bird, Elmo, Cookie Monster, hamburgers, Cookie Monster, cheeseburger, and just all these different random things. But again, no one could tell me anything. Even the speech therapist couldn't tell me anything. We then moved to Houston, and I enrolled him in a preschool program here. He was now 4 years old, almost 4. And you know how like 6 or 8 weeks into the program, you have this parent-teacher conference and they tell you all about your kid. And
no, I don't have kids.
Okay, well, that's right. I'm sorry.
You're talking to the people out there. But yes. Yeah, the parent.
When you are in this is in preschool. Once you're in high school, you come to an open house and you come with, thousands of other parents.
Well, I was going to say the only time my parents would go to school was because I was in trouble. So,
okay.
So it was usually.
But it was mild trouble, very minor trouble. I'm sure you wouldn't be in major trouble. I'm sure.
Well, we'll go with that.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's what sounds good to the
audience. But this is the typical. Let's meet and greet. It's been 6 weeks now. The teacher kind of knows what's going on.
Yes, you pay for a private school. You deserve some one-on-one time.
Oh, this is a private school.
Yeah, it was a private preschool, and you deserve one-on-one time with the teacher.
Sure.
And that's what you're paying for. That's one of the things. It was in a wonderful, wonderful private preschool. It was at my congregation, my temple, and I walk into the room. And again, I want to tell you, I'm a parent who never had her head in the sand. I'm always tell me more. You're not going to offend me. I'm an open book. Please, please, I want to know. I walk into the room and there's the 2 teachers, the principal of the school, and the headmaster over the entire school. And I walked in, and in my very dry humor, because I have to have humor in my life, otherwise I wouldn't survive. And I said, ladies, good morning. Either you're going to tell me my child is a prodigy and some off-the-mark genius child, or Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, because when you got the headmaster and the vice principal, usually that meant the cops are coming shortly.
Yeah, either there's something wrong, or, oh my God, your child is so brilliant, he needs to go to a different school for gifted and talented. Well, it was the latter. It was, Houston, we have a problem. And it's so interesting because everybody starts off with, he's so sweet. And it's like, okay. And you're thrilled that you have a sweet child. And they say you've generally done a good job when your child is out in public or at other people's homes, that they're polite and nice and share their toys and things like that. So I'm like, okay, we're doing okay. He's so sweet. But we notice we are having trouble communicating with him. We notice he's not processing things. He doesn't interact with the other children. And I said, I agree. What do you think? We don't know, but we have a specialist we'd like for you to have him evaluated by. I'm all over it. I call, being the popular man that he is, fabulous developmental pediatrician in Houston, Texas, Danny Williamson. Wonderful, wonderful man. Very good diagnostician. He's a pediatrician, but he has, he no longer sees kids for like colds and flus and things like that. He strictly studies development of children. Made the appointment. Took 3.5 months, of course, specialist. Filled out the paperwork. He met with Jason, did some interactive play, things like that. Filled out a ton of forms, tons. Teachers filled out forms so that he could really get a good picture.
Evaluation forms.
Exactly,
not
of
just,
Jason. But this wasn't just one sheet.
I was going to say, this is not just because of healthcare. This is...
Exactly. This was really to find out what can we do to help you with your child. And we go back for the follow-up meeting. I was married at the time. And my husband and I went, and he said, I've concluded all the tests, and your child has PDD-NOS, which stands for Pervasive Developmental Disorder, Not Otherwise Specified. It's a form of autism. I'm like, what did he just say?
And then when they say not otherwise specified,
you're like,
that's
so what
vague.
are we specifying here? It was just, again, one of these clinical terms that doctors come up with. And I'm, what? Autistic? And of course, me being, Rain Man, I think, came out in, I have it in
86.
the book. 86, thank you.
I'm a guess. That's a guess. 86, 88, somewhere there.
Somewhere in there. And I think I have that out there. And so now where this is 1994, I'm like, he's more high functioning than Dustin Hoffman was in Rain Man. And I was like, so then everything felt surreal. And I'm like, it was a mixture of, I'm so thrilled that somebody is telling me something, but what do I do now? So I'm given all of these references and support groups and schools that Jason can go to. He did finish the year at his private preschool. They were very, very nice. And then that was the beginning of all of these special private schools that he had to go to. And through the years, autism has really changed. Some people would say, my child isn't autistic, they have PDD. Some people call it Asperger's syndrome.
And that's the other one I was familiar with, Asperger's.
Right. And they'll say, well, my child's not autistic, they have Asperger's because my child's more high functioning. I am of the belief, me, Judy Blake, I don't care what you call it, get the child or the adult the help that they need so that they can develop the compensatory skills to cope throughout life. That is my number one concern. And that's one of the reasons that I love to give speeches and that I wrote the book, was to raise awareness, so that everyone was educated. Because I can promise you there's a lot of kids who are misdiagnosed, not diagnosed, overdiagnosed, because people don't understand. We live in Houston, so it's wonderful. We're in a large city, largest medical center in the world. We have great specialists here. But I know people who live in smaller towns, and I can promise you they do not have the awareness that we do here.
Now, do you think if there's a situation where people are getting their children diagnosed and they're kind of ignoring the diagnosis because they don't want to believe that they have a special needs kid?
I think that applies to some parents, and that's really, really difficult. And there's such a stigma with mental illness, and it really kills me that still exists. Years ago, I remember Tipper Gore. She tried to have a massive campaign to really make it so that mental health was not a stigma anymore. And I really applauded her efforts because I think it's wonderful. Unfortunately, there is still that stigma because as a society, if we can't see it, we think we know what the problem is. And I'll tell you, people have misjudged me. They have ostracized me. They have outwardly said, what is wrong with you and your child? Lots of remarks.
Well,
because he was doing things.
Well, I think there's the confusion between a misbehaving child.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of them.
There are.
There are so many out there.
Let me tell you.
That, because just by watching the child, like you said, when there's a kid who's got autism,
Absolutely.
When that's just bad parenting.
Well, a parent who really, to me, if you're out in public and your child is just running wild, there's a difference between that and my child who paces back and forth because he has sensory issues, or he flaps his hands, or he has some tics and he's kind of moving around and he's real jittery. It's because he's having trouble taking in the environment.
He's sensory overload.
Exactly. And I'm not going to leave him locked up.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do that because he needs to be exposed to the world just like every other person. And he's entitled to that. And it's hard because I never want anyone to feel sorry for me. I do not want anyone's pity. I don't want your sympathy. What I want is compassion and understanding for me and other parents like me, because I talk to a lot of parents. And it's very difficult when we are doing the best that we can. Our child is doing the best that they can. Yet we're criticized because people just assume we are not disciplining, they're overreacting, that kind of thing.
Now, when you say that you're doing the best that you can, when you have an autistic child, what are some of the things, because now this is after the fact, now that you know, and they told you, and then they start giving you some techniques and some things, you can give me some examples of how your life changed once you knew what the situation was. What were some of the things that they told you that would be more helpful?
Most paramount, what we did is he went into a private school that had smaller classes, 2 teachers, and the learning is just different. It's done more methodically. It's you focus a lot on verbal skills and social communication. To me, it's wonderful that my oldest son is very bright, but if you can't communicate with people and get along with people, life is very, very difficult. I don't care how brilliant you are. He had a lot of speech therapy, occupational therapy, social skills classes. Certain things are very, they're innate within us. We meet someone, we say, "Hi, how are you?" Well, my oldest used to walk up to people, and his fascination of the month was the table of periodic elements.
Oh, of course.
He would walk up to people and say, "What's your favorite periodic element?"
Cesium.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just
There you go. And that's a great answer. And he would then tell you all of the characteristics of that element. And some people would look at him like, number one, what's a periodic element? Some people would say, "Are we in school? What is there a candid camera somewhere? Like, what am I missing here?"
And that's I think a lot of people forget that these kids, while they cannot communicate the same way that we all do, tremendously bright, because I couldn't remember. I mean, cesium was just off the top of my head because I'm a smartass. So
That's okay. That's a good thing.
So, and I didn't know you
And
were going to ask.
most people would say gold.
Yeah,
silver,
but you always got to go. You
magnesium.
got to go for the weird ones, because
There you go.
Because if it's gold, that's easy. Gold, silver, calcium.
That's right. And you would keep him on his toes, and he would be impressed by you. Would know that. Another phase that he went through was he's fascinated by sports. He's not athletic, but he was a walking ESPN statistic.
Oh, the stats.
Miniature Bob Costas. So he could tell you every football play, basketball play, you name it. And he would walk up to people. Again, no eye contact, because a lot of people on the spectrum, they lack that eye contact. And others perceive it as somebody as being rude or disinterested. It's not that my children are trying to do that or adults are trying to do that. They lack the skills to have eye contact. It's extremely difficult for them. So he would also walk up to people. You'd be talking. He'd say, "Hi, nice to meet you, Jason." And he would say, looking away, "Michigan beat Notre Dame 24-17. And then he would look away, and you'd be like, "What?"
And that'd be out of the blue. It had no contextual.
People who are on the spectrum tend to say what's on their mind. That social filter that most of us have is not there. My youngest child is fascinated by movies, TV shows, gadgets on TV. I'll be in the kitchen and he'll be watching TV, and I'll be cooking something, and all of a sudden he'll say, "Have you tried OxyClean?" And I'm like looking around like, am I in a commercial? He'll say, "It gets the stains out. You should try it, Mom." Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. And Ryan is now 16. He is more delayed than Jason is.
And I was going to segue to that.
He's bright in some ways, and he is such an angel. He's such a sweet boy. He doesn't have the book smarts that Jason does, and he's very, very sweet. He's mainstreamed in school, but he's in co-teach classes, smaller classes. Assignments are modified. I think there's some more processing issues there. He's 16, but more. Some people feel he's more like a 13 or 14-year-old. Some people feel more like he's an 11 or 12-year-old. And that's what his doctor feels, and I tend to agree. I can't seem to get him past that 11 or 12-year-old hump of the Disney shows and things like that. He's much more immature. He paces back and forth. He bounces. He flaps his hands. Talking for him is very, very difficult. And it's hard because when we go out for dinner, he always wants to bring his Game Boy, his PSP, and for those of your audience members who don't know what that is, it's a portable gaming system.
Handheld system, yeah.
Handheld system, exactly. And he always wants to have it with him. And it's really difficult because if we're going out with all adults and there's no other kid for him to talk to, kind of you remember when you were younger, and it's like, oh, great, we got to go out with the adults again, and what am I going to talk about? I never want Ryan to be perceived as rude, but it really is hard when I'm just thrilled he's going with us to the restaurant.
Yeah, because the perception is, oh, look, that kid's ignoring everybody.
Right. Or the mother's ignoring the child so she can have a good time.
But it's just the fact that he's out in the open.
Exactly.
Now, it seems like you got one that's 20 and one that's 16, and you didn't get, and Ryan was Jason, the oldest, was diagnosed when he was 4 or 5. So
4.5, whereas Ryan, I found out the diagnosis for Jason in the spring, and Ryan just turned a year old. And this was in March of 96.
So,
and what happened
was it easier to find out?
Yes, it was. I already noticed things. And it's hard to explain, but other parents who have autistic children, they get it. It's that look. It's almost like that empty blank look, or the way they cock their head, or the way they hyper-focus on something. So I called the same developmental pediatrician again, filled out the same forms, had similar testing, a little bit different because he was younger. And he's taking notes, and I go back for my follow-up visit, and I said to him, Dr. Williamson, you're going to tell me that Ryan's autistic also, aren't you? And he looked at me and he said, I am so sorry. And tears just started streaming down my face. Because as it was, I was doing the speech and the OT and private school. And oh my God, how am I now going to manage double the speech, double the OT, double the private schools? I don't need to tell you the financial ramifications of all this. It was very, very difficult. And, people always ask me, well, how did you do it?
Well, that was my next question. The coping mechanism. What did you do to get that adjustment? Because I
used to say I drank heavily, but then that offended some people, and that was really a joke.
Yeah, people don't understand. People don't understand that you have to have a release somewhere.
You do. And by the way, just to clarify, I did not drink heavily.
No.
And it was one of those things where this is the hand you've been dealt, and it was not easy, Craig. It was not easy at all. I had my days. Of course, I had my moments of why me. I had my moments of why my kids. No child ever asked to be brought into this world, my grandmother used to say. And it was one of those things, you just do it. You go into overdrive. At least that's what I did. Now, I know there are some parents who did not do that. I know some parents whose children have special needs, and the child is taken care of by a nanny, housekeeper, what have you. And that's fine. I am never here to judge, cast my opinion. I can only say what worked for me. And my kids were everything. My marriage and my kids were everything to me. And it was really a lot of juggling. I would work with Jason when Ryan was napping. I would have Jason doing something when I was working with Ryan. And it was a major struggle. Jason went to a lot of different private schools, not because they didn't work out from the standpoint that they asked us to leave, but each school was different for him for that year. So we went to one school, then we went to a second school, and then a third school, and then the Houston Independent School District started a class for high-functioning autistic kids. And this was really remarkable because with all the cutbacks, it was an incredible program. So from 2nd to 5th grade, thank God he was in one program.
And is the day structured so much for when you just have to be completely organized to know what every moment is, because you've just got so many different things you've got to keep going? Is that what you did?
Do.
Was just
structure, I think, is important for all kids. I really do. But it's that fine line between, you need to have structure, because when you have structure for kids like mine, that reduces their anxiety level. And that's really, really important. If you know what to expect, then you feel better. But it's also, you don't want your children to be so expecting the next step that they can never deal with change. We all, as people, have to learn to deal with change. It's a part of life. And it's that balance between, I tried to anticipate what I could. There were other things I couldn't. And the biggest challenge for both kids was the weather.
Yeah.
Especially being in Houston,
where it could be sunny all day, 100 degrees, and then a massive dark clouds thunderstorm for 10 minutes, and then it goes right back to sun.
And then it goes away. And that
freaks me out as a regular person.
It does, and it is frightening. And the floods, and we went through more issues with bad weather. I mean, they would watch the Weather Channel because they had to know what was going on. What's the degrees going to be? I'm like, it's cool out. Well, what's the degree? Okay, I'm not Frank Billingsley on the Weather on KPRC here, and it's as a parent, I always had to be not just one step ahead, but probably 6 steps ahead, And I always had to kind of anticipate that. And the weather was the biggest challenge because I knew that it bothered both kids to go out when it was raining. But I was not going to cancel our plans because it was raining. I mean, obviously, if it was a torrential downpour and it was flooding and we were just going to go to McDonald's or something, forget it. You know, I wasn't going to do that because the bayou floods in 3 seconds.
But if you're going to stop every time it rains here in Houston, you're not going to do anything every day for a month and a half.
Yeah,
because,
except for the summer, but that's exactly right.
Well, in the summer, it still rains in the afternoon, but for 10 minutes, but you can't cancel everything.
Exactly. And I wasn't going to live my life that way, nor was I going to have my kids do that. So those were challenges. You know, part of the problem with autism, too, is how do you have the chance to explain to your kid what other people are going to say, how they're going to act? It's impossible. So teaching social skills, it's like, how do you define life? Well, who can? Because you never know what's going to happen the next moment.
Yeah, you don't know if you're going to run into a rude person, a smart ass like me. You're going to run into someone who's also shy. And then you got two people not looking at each other, not talking to each other.
Exactly. And it's very, very difficult. So it would be easier, and I'm terrible at math, but it probably would be easier for me to learn geometry.
Ask Jason.
Yeah, ask Jason. That's right. He'll tell you because he's brilliant. And it would be easier to do that than to teach social skills. You know, parents, we teach our kids, don't talk to strangers. And that's a really good policy. But yet, you and I, we talk to strangers every day. We go into the grocery store and we check out, and the person behind the cashier says, "Hi, how are you doing?" Well, to my child, you know, now if I was an adult and had never been told, I wouldn't want to talk to that person because, again, they're a stranger. But I know it's, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?"
Yeah, certain strangers.
How do you, again, though, how do you explain that
to
a child
rule.
when you say don't talk to strangers, yet we talk to strangers every single day? Or we're in a restaurant and we think we know the person, but we're not sure, but they look kind of familiar, and we're like, we kind of give the, "Hey, how you doing?"
Oh, the head nod.
Yeah, the head nod. That's right. And then my child would say, "Oh, who's that?" "I'm not sure." "Well, then why'd you do that?" "Well, because I think I know them." "Well, do you or don't you?"
Because it's pretty cut and dry for them. They either know it or they don't know it.
Yeah, everything is black or white for kids who are on the spectrum. And they don't do well with sarcasm. They don't do well with those.
They would hate me.
Well, it's not that they would hate you. It would just be difficult.
They wouldn't understand what I was doing.
Exactly. And it's so funny because we all use these sayings. Keep your eye on the ball. Well, then that autistic kid is going to put the ball on their eye.
Yeah, they're very literal.
They're literal. They're concrete thinkers. And, you know, the expression, you know, you're walking on thin ice. They'd be looking down, looking like, where's the ice? Because they're so literal. And time is a big issue for them. Everything has to be exact. And when my kids would go to bed, it wasn't 8 o'clock. It was 8:01 or 8:05. It was like, okay. So I'd say, or they'd ask me, "Mom, what time was it?" This was before they could, you know, tell time. It's about 4 o'clock. Well, what's the exact time? Okay. It's 3:58.
Yeah, so.
And it is exhausting because you always have to be like, okay, what time is it? And what's the exact time? And if you told my kids you were going to do something, well, by golly, you better do it. And I've had to educate their teachers as well in the mainstream schools. Obviously, the private special schools, I didn't have to do that. But with the mainstream teachers, you have to, because autism manifests itself in different ways. Well, so I had to tell them, you know, if you told the class, okay, say it was second period and it started at, 8:45 or something. Okay, class, at 9:15, we're going to move on to this section.
And if you don't at 9:15.
And if you don't at 9:15, my son's going to be pointing out, Mrs. Williams, it's 9:15 and we're supposed to go on to the next section. Now, if I hadn't explained to her that was his, issue, she would have thought, honey, you be sarcastic like that again and you're going in detention because you don't call out the teacher like that. My youngest son, Ryan, is very, very impulsive. We work on it and work on it and work on it constantly. You wait until someone's finished before you start talking. If the teacher's talking, you raise your hand. All those kinds of things. Ryan is so impulsive that the teacher would say, okay, class, I'm going to explain this. Save your questions for the very end, which isn't unusual for a teacher to say that.
Right.
They want to cover the topic.
They don't want interruptions.
They don't want interruptions. They want to keep that train of thought going. My child would say, 5 sentences into it, and he's raising his hand. The teacher, is kind of like, just a second, Well, my child, again, raising his hand, and then we'll just blurt out the question. And the other kids are like, did you not just hear what the teacher said?
But he had to do it. It's one of those. It is impulse.
It is, and he tries. But when you have someone who's impulsive or anxious or very obsessive compulsive, OCD for short, they can't move on, and they can't listen to what you're saying if they're focusing on something else. They just can't. They get completely lost, and you have lost them. One of my kids, say you had a 20-question test, and he couldn't finish question number 4. He couldn't go to number 5.
Yeah.
Until he finished number 4 and knew how to answer it.
Like because and I was like that but just in general, because I like to finish things. So I've learned to jump ahead and go back. They don't do that. They get hung up on that. But there is a good thing. There's a happy ending to this to some degree. Is where we got the oldest.
He's in college. I am so proud of him.
Now, is he local or is he?
He's in San Antonio.
Oh, so how is that working out?
He's doing a great job, and the school has been wonderful. It's a small school. He goes to Trinity University in San Antonio, the most amazing school. They have been wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I knew not to send him to UT with 50,000 students. He would never work. It's too overwhelming. He is bright. He's sociable. He is the best friend that any of his peers could have, and he is really a terrific kid. My 16-year-old is a sophomore at Bel Air High School. It's been very, very challenging for him because it's a big school, but the teachers have been wonderful, the administration. But it's a challenge every day.
Now, the book's been out for a while now.
Yes,
it
has.
And I'm sure it's doing really well. Where can people find it?
They can find it on my website, www.judysworld.info, and that's JUDYSWORLD.info. I'm working on getting it on Amazon. That is a goal of mine. And but right now it's purchased through my website, and I'm looking to have it in some local Houston bookstores as well.
And again, it's Judy's World, the world of autism through the eyes of a mother. Judy, this is the second time I've been with you, and I know what a amazing person you are in general.
Thank you.
To know that you have this as well, that has been with you for the entire your child's entire life, knowing all the work that you do besides the autism, I'm just amazed by you because I'm tired just listening to all the stuff that you do. I don't know if I can.
You'll go take a nap now.
I am going to go take a nap now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I want to thank Judy Blake for taking time out of her busy schedule to join me. Remember, you can always find us on Facebook. You can find us at realitycheckpodcast.com. If you like the podcast and you want to really help us out, go to iTunes. Go to iTunes and leave a review. Let people know what you like about the show. We'd really appreciate it. Also, you can always find us at realitycheckpodcast.com and like us on Facebook to get the podcast in your feed every Tuesday morning. Have a great week.